I'm Purple Dragon. This is my audition for the narrator role. The first time Winter disappointed his family, he was 2 years old. Or at least, the first time he knew he disappointed them. Perhaps it had been happening all along, and they had hidden it behind the stern, demanding faces they showed to all the royal dragonettes. He could remember the dawn that day, the morning of his 11th hunt. The sub-zero chill in the air, the paling purple of the sky, 2 moons still high overhead, while the third slid its thin crescent silver down below the horizon. A snowy owl was perched on one of the palace outcroppings, its talons digging into the ice. It glowed beatedly at Winter as if it saw his disgrace coming. His sister, Icicle, was in the hunting party, and his brother, Hailstorm too, along with 2 Glacier's dragonets, one of Winter's royal uncles, 3 attendants, and Winter's parents, Tundra and Narwhal. They gathered in the courtyard of the ice palace, stamping their feet and beating their wings as the glorious freezing air filled their lungs. The sharp crunch of snow beneath their claws broke the stillness of the morning. Winter remembered looking up at his mother as she hissed for attention. Tundra growled. She shot a glittering look at Icicle, coiled beside Winter. Icicle was only 2 years old as well, but she already knew the future her parents had planned for her. So did Winter, although he suspected he wasn't supposed to. He couldn't remember how he knew. Had he overheard his parents whispering when they thought he was too young to understand? Or had he figured it out from their behavior over the years? But he did know. One day Icicle would challenge their aunt, Queen Glacier, for the throne. That was the reason she was hatched, and destiny she was trained for. To kill Glacier and become queen herself. The only question was when. Glacier grew older and larger and stronger each year, and Icicle got to strike before one of Glacier's own daughters seized the queenship. Daughters, sisters, or nieces could try for the throne. Cousins could not. Neither could sisters-in-law, or Tundra surely would have thrown down the challenge herself. So, Winter's parents could wait forever. But they also needed to make sure Icicle was ready. She'd have only one chance, kill or die. That's how it worked. Icicle lifted her snout and returned to her mother's arch, calculating look. She said, sounding almost bored. She flicked her tail dismissively at Hailstorm and Winter. Hailstorm said. He grinned and hopped from foot to foot, full of energy the way he always was. Winter often wished some of his brother's confidence would spill over onto him. The 5 dragonets set out first, flying away from the palace in 5 different directions. At their age, every hunt was still a test, a chance to prove your worth or climb higher in the rankings. Not that Hailstorm needed to climb any higher, even at the very top since he was not quite 2 years old himself. He made the top of the list the same day Icicle and Winter hatched, in fact. Winter knew it was risky, but he decided to try flying out to sea to hunt. Sometimes polar bears could be found on the islands off the coast, or drifting on the icebergs, or swimming from one to another. He had yet to catch a polar bear after 10 hunts, and as a result, his place in the rankings was lower than anyone in their family had ever been. His mother would observe coldly during their tense family meals, sliding a bowl of dripping meat down the table. He scanned the waves for a long time, hoping to see a bobbing white head. Nothing moved except the sea itself and the shifting reflections of the rising sun. Finally, he swerved down toward one of the larger islands, but studied where the caves where bears might hide. And suddenly, there, standing at the edge of the water, staring south. She was huge, with a yellowish tinge to her dingy white fur. The wind was blowing his scent away from her, and he was gliding. She hadn't heard him or smelled him yet. In a few heartbeats he could be down there, sinking his claws into her shoulders. She put up a fight, but he would win. He'd bring a polar bear home at last, and if he hurried, it might even be him sitting next to the queen at dinner tonight, while Glacier ate his polar bear. He wheeled upward, ready to dive, and then a movement caught the corner of his eye. He tilted his head toward the caves. A pair of tiny cubs was wobbling out into the snow. One of them tripped and sprawled out, paws flopping every which way, and the other growled with delight and tackled him. They rolled, wrestling playfully, and their mother swung her head around to grunt at them. Winter hesitated. He told himself. But there was something else watching the bears. It was well hidden, higher up among the rocks above the cave, but Winter's sharp ice-wing eyes spotted it when it moved. The creature was wrapped in so many furs at first Winter almost thought it was their polar bear cub. But there was no mistaking those clever, thin brown paws for the great, clumsy paws of bears. The scavenger was carrying a kind of rough spear, and his eyes were fixated on the polar bears, so it hadn't noticed the dragon overhead yet either. Winter scanned the island and spotted a wooden canoe that had been hauled onto the pebbly beach. How far had the scavenger traveled through the rough Arctic waters? Was it hunting the bears for prey, like Winter was? If so, why wasn't it moving? Why had it lowered its spears if it was already giving up? Winter stared intently, tracking the scavenger's gaze. The whale was watching the cubs. Was it hesitating, the way he had? Did it feel sorry for them too? Surely that was ridiculous. Scavengers couldn't feel pity. A hungry scavenger wouldn't spare the life of a bear just to protect her cubs. Would it? He wished he could scoop up the scavenger and study it more closely. Tundra's voice suddenly shrieked across the sky. Winter nearly leaped out of his scales. Winter twisted around and saw, to his horror, that his mother, father, and uncle were towards him with expressions. Right behind him was Icicle, with a polar bear carcass dangling from her claws. He dove frantically toward the bear, but the noise had alerted her to danger, and she was already charging up the slope and bundling her cubs back into the cave. Winter beat his wings and lunged with his talons outstretched, but they closed in on empty air as the three polar bears vanished into a narrow stony passageway, where dragons would never be able to follow. Winter scrambled at the cave entrance for a moment, but there was nothing he could do. The bears were gone. They'd make him kill it for the dinner feast, and for some reason he didn't want to. He couldn't imagine anyone eating those little paws, or the scavenger's head with his wide dark eyes. A shiver went through his wings. Narwhal roared, laying beside him. Winter's father slammed one talon to the side of the cliff, and a small avalanche of snow crashed over Winter's head. Icicle offered, coming down with a thump and a splattering of bear blood. Her voice was sneering and triumphant. Winter cried. Narwhal hissed. Winter stared miserably at his talons. He knew his parents would have reported it anyway, even with no other witnesses. They believed in the strict Icewind codes of behavior. They agreed that the only way to make him strong was to expose all his weaknesses. Shame and fear were powerful weapons for teaching young dragonettes. If everyone was disappointed in him, surely he would fight hard to prove himself. He thought fiercely. But he still did not tell his parents about the scavenger hiding nearby. He glanced back only once, as they were all slipping away, to make sure it was all right. That incident set him down to the fifth circle, above only 1-year-old dragonets and families that barely counted as aristocrats. For months, his mother had made him memorize long sagas about dragons who attempted the Diamond Trail to get back to the first circle, including about 100 verses speculating how gruesomely they might have died. The trial was a last resort, rarely used, but she made it clear that no dragonet of hers would reach its 7th hatching day at any lower than second circle, even if it meant returning to an ancient, mysterious, and most likely deadly ritual. With that threat hanging over him, he had struggled to claw his way back up through the rankings, bit by bit, and he had tried as hard as he could for so long. And then, losing Hailstorm, actually leaving Hailstorm, abandoning him to his fate without a fight, had wiped out all that work, and he had to start all over from the 6th circle. He thought. But everything was different now. Now he knew Hailstorm was alive, not dead as they all thought. Queen Scarlet still held him prisoner, hidden somewhere secret, and Icicle had been bargaining for Hailstorm's life, before Winter had ruined her plan. She had agreed to kill the dragonets of Destiny in exchange for Hailstorm, but Winter had stopped her. Which meant if Scarlet killed Hailstorm now, it would be even more Winter's fault. He clenched his talons. But maybe he could get to her before that happened. If he could find Scarlet, maybe there was a chance to save his brother. He swiped raindrops off his face, inhaling. The downpour was insistent and repulsive. He'd take a howling snowstorm over this dripping, soggy horribleness any day. The forest floor squashed between his claws, and the wet tree branches slashed his wings as they swayed in the storm. Below him, his pet scavenger stood in the open doorway of the cage Winter had built. Bandit squinted up to the dragon in a thunderstorm. Winter said impatiently. He rattled the cage, and the scavenger flinched. Winter had spent days and days on planning and constructing this cage, making it beautiful for his very first pet scavenger, and then Bandit hadn't appreciated it at all. He never used the swing or the running wheel. Mostly he covered them under the furs and squeaked, or tried to run away. Winter demanded. Bandit was the most disappointing pet of all time, but Winter couldn't help it. He still cared about him. Otherwise, he would have abandoned Bandit to be someone's dinner back at Jade Mountain. Winter still remembered the expression on that first hunter-scavenger's face, all these years later. The curiosity and the dragon-like sympathy in his eyes. He hoped to see something like that in Bandit one day. But it didn't matter now. Nothing mattered except finding Hailstorm. Winter grumbled. He poked at Bandit with one claw, but the scavenger dodged and retreated farther into the cage, covering his head. Winter felt a flash of pity for the creature, and then felt furious with himself for caring when there was more important things to worry about. Queen Glacier had granted him permission to have an exotic pet while at the academy, but where he saw an exotic pet, his parents were likely to see a delicious snack. He heard a voice yell somewhere off in the trees. A beam of fire lit up faces of 4 dragons, hurrying toward him through the forest. To his astonishment, it was the rest of his winglet from the Jade Mountain Academy: Keebly, Turtle, Kinkajou, and Moon. He pushed past against the little stump his heart made when he saw her. Winter demanded, how had they even found him, and why? Moon said simply, her eyes caught in his, shining in the bits of moonlight that fought through the storm clouds. She always looked at him as if she could see more of him than anyone else, as if she saw dazzling mountain peaks where his parents saw nothing but a lump of gray ice. Kinkajou added, she flapped her wings as Keebly sent out another burst of flame, and Winter could see that she had turned bright yellow with purple spots. That's what Rainwings were, all of them, flamboyant and ridiculous, with their feelings splattered all over their scales like that. It was embarrassing to be around. Winter glanced down at Bandit. You couldn't let these dragons have scrapped him. He said firmly, no matter what they said, they couldn't change his mind. Moon said, her voice quiet but as determined as his. Turtle said, stamping his feet. Kinkajou said. He saw Keebly staring intently at him, as though the Sandwing was figuring out his next move. Keebly had done that all the time in the cave they shared on Jade Mountain, and it had been very unsettling to live with. Winter could just imagine what it'd be like to have the Sandwing's black eyes inspecting everything he did on the path to finding Hailstorm. He said, perhaps she would give him a wing of soldiers of his own to command. Or perhaps she would send out all her warrior dragons to search for Hailstorm. Regardless, he knew he needed the power of the Icewind Queen to save his brother. That was a smart thing to do. Wasn't it? Kinkajou asked. Keebly said, this was exactly what he didn't want. More options. More doubt. Keebly was right. Icicle was the only one who knew anything about Hailstorm and Scarlet. Falling Icicle would make sense. Except, Winter said bitterly, back to the Ice Kingdom, he hoped, although she had to know Queen Glacier would be furious about her breaking the Jade Mountain truce. Keebly said, of course he did. He added, nodding at Kinkajou. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Winter thought. Thunder rumbled overhead. Kinkajou said fiercely. Suddenly, Moon let out a yelp of pain and crumpled forward, her wings collapsing around her. Winter stepped toward her, but Kinkajou was faster, catching the Nightwing in her wings. She cried, staggering sideways. A flash of lightning lit up Moon's face as the black dragon lifted her snout to the sky. Something blank and weird had taken over her eyes, like frost in a lake. And then she began to speak in a voice sounding nothing like her own. The voice lurched to a stop and Moon closed her eyes, releasing all the tension out of her wings. Everyone stared at her. Winter's heart was hammering like the pelting raindrops. Those words. That couldn't be what it sounded like, could it? Keebly said at last. Winter met his eyes in the next flash of lightning. Keebly looked as terrified as he felt, as shaken as he had been on the day of the explosion in her history class. Kinkajou said to Moon. Winter said slowly, but it couldn't be. The Nightwings had sworn to everyone that their powers were gone. Tsunami, Sunny, Starflight, Clay, and Glory had confirmed it. No more mind reading. No more prophecies. Ever again. That's what they said, exactly. So someone was lying. But who? Moon shook her head and pressed herself upright, her wings unsteady. She said, the Seawing fumbled with the armband he always wore. Winter could see that a couple of the black stones were missing from it, and he watched. And as he watched, Turtle pried out another one and passed it to Winter. The stone was small, about the size of a dragon's tooth, and had a strange sheen to it, although that might have been the effect of the rain and lightning. It was jagged around the edges but not sharp. It looked fairly ordinary. He asked. She sounded nervous, as though he might stab her with his tail spikes at any moment, which you refrained from doing to anyone so far, so he thought that was rather unfair. Winter said. Keebly said. Kinkajou said. Turtle said. Keebly asked Moon. Moon said. Winter didn't like the sound of that. He closed his claws around the rock, frowning at her, but Moon had gone quiet, staring into the dark as though she were hearing something else. A few moments passed, and then she steamed to snap back into herself. She said. He said. She said. She took a deep breath. Winter's tail twitched. His heart felt like the rock in his talons, small and hard. She went on. He forced out past the claws that seemed to be closing around his throat. She said,